Okay, welcome everyone to the workshop. Thank you all for coming. First of all, does everyone have GameMaker installed? GameMaker Studio 2? Okay. If you don't, you can install it. I have some USB drives with the installer to make it a bit quicker. And does everyone have the package that I sent by email? Okay, if you didn't download it, you have the link here. Some more people coming. Okay, so in this workshop, basically we'll be making a very small game. It's based on a tutorial, very old tutorial by the guy who made GameMaker originally. It's a shoot 'em up, and you'll see in a second it has some planes and stuff. So I'll be going through it with you, and sometimes I'll ask you to try and do something by yourselves. And if you have any questions at any point, just ask. So, GameMaker is, GameMaker is a 2D game engine, so no 3D, and it's very, very simple to use. Well, it's very simple to use. It doesn't have as many features as stuff like Unity or Godot, and so it's also easier to learn because you don't have like a lot of things, which means you have to do a lot of things by yourself. If you want like some fancy collisions, maybe GameMaker might not support that, and you might have to implement them yourselves. There have been many versions of GameMaker. Right now I actually have some difficulty in recommending the engine to you. I think it's good for the game design course. By the way, who here is doing the game design course? All of you, right? Okay. Right now it's a bit expensive, but I hear that there's some licenses in the game lab, so that's good. GameMaker actually becomes sometimes cheaper and sometimes more expensive, depending on when a new version comes out. And right now the free trial is not very good, but hopefully soon it will have more features for free. Here are some famous games that were made with GameMaker. Hopefully you recognize at least one of them. Probably Undertale is the most well-known, or Hotline Miami. Yeah, so it's been used for professional games. It's a very old tool, by the way, as you can see. It's 20 years old now. Okay, so let's begin. I'm gonna open GameMaker. If you can all do the same. So, first step, of course, press new, and then you have two options. There's drag and drop, which is like for people who are scared of programming. We're engineers, so you'll choose GameMaker language, and choose the folder in which you're going to be working on. Doesn't matter. Workshop. Has everyone got it open yet?
No.
No? Okay. I can...
My free trial expired.
Oh, okay. Do you have like another email account?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a GameMaker account. Okay. I don't know if that's actually legal according to their terms of service, but hopefully it'll be okay. But yeah, about the package. So the package contains the assets, which are these sprites here we'll be using, and it contains the slides as well, and it has also some checkpoints which are quite useful. Basically, if you get lost or something, or if you arrive late to the next session or whatever, you can use just one of these versions. Like, these are pre-made versions. This is the complete workshop. That one is mostly empty. So depending on where we are, you can just load up the checkpoint and start working from there if you get lost. Okay. So GameMaker, this is our workspace. On the right here we have the resources. Quite simple. We'll be going through some of the most important ones, like sprites, scripts, and objects and rooms. So, does everyone have the program open yet, except for your classmate here? Hi. Okay. Everyone ready to start? No less? Okay, so first thing we'll be doing is we need to add some sprites to our game. So first of all, we're going to add a simple background. So I'm just going to drag the sprite ocean here to GameMaker. Just add it to wherever you can drop it. And as you can see, it immediately drops a sprite for us. Now we have the ocean sprite on the right here. And there's a few things you can do in the sprite menu. We're not going to mess with it right now. There's no animation, as you can see, or anything. And it already has the a nice name we can use. I don't know if you can see well with this projector. Hopefully there won't be any problems. Okay, so we don't need anything else with this sprite. So we're going to go into the room. Rooms are like the scenes in Unity, if you've ever used it. And essentially, it's the game space where we'll be placing our objects and everything. Those are the rooms. And first of all, we're going to place the background, the ocean. So you can see the layers here on the left. We have an instances layer and a background layer. So we're going to pick the background layer right now, which is just for graphical stuff. And just there's a sprite thing we can place here. We just drag the sprite over here. So you can select a sprite for the background layer, this one in particular. So just pick the ocean. And you can actually scroll down. If you look here at the our room, you'll see that we only have one sprite right here, and we want it to repeat. So just click on horizontal tile and vertical tile, and this makes the whole thing repeat. And now we also want the background to move. So if you scroll down a little bit more, you'll see a vertical speed, right here. And just give it a speed of 1 for now. And then to run our game, we can just click on the arrow on the top here, press run, or if you press F5 as well, and you should see the background moving. GameMaker automatically runs the game on the room that is topmost from the room menu. Yeah, so you can see, this is it. I actually forgot to make the room smaller. Okay, has everyone been able to do this thing in the background? Okay, everything okay? Right, so.
Sorry, could you give me because I need to.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you need to update it? You can just say, you can skip the update.
Yeah, no, I didn't have to log in if I skip it.
Really? Are you sure it's okay. Okay, so everyone done with this part? Easy, right? So next we're gonna add some. Actually, let me check what we're gonna do next. I think now we want to add the player sprite. So yeah, exactly. So just drag another sprite here. Notice that this one, this plane right here, actually has in the file name strip3 at the end, and this automatically tells GameMaker that this is actually one sprite with 3 frames. So when we drop this into GameMaker, it will create a single sprite with 3 animation frames. As you can see here, there's 3 images. It's kind of small, but you can see it, and you can play the animation. You'll see that the plane, like, kind of the things at the front spin. I'm going to give it a speed of 30. You can change the animation speed here. Yeah, this is all we're going to be doing with animation for this tutorial. Quite simple. Okay, and I'm going to remove this part of the sprite name just because it looks nicer. Okay, next we want to right, now we want to add an object. That's one of the most important things in GameMaker. You can just right-click the objects thing on the resources tree and click create object to make a new object. And this is where most of the code is going to be happening. Let's name it object player. Yeah, it's useful to have like a good naming scheme for your resources. So usually what I do is for sprites I give it the name SPR and then an underscore. For objects I use OBJ. For rooms it might be RM. And for scripts, which are basically functions in GameMaker, I use no prefix. Just because I think it looks a bit nicer in the code when you're writing. It makes them look more like functions. So just call it object sprite and drag the player sprite here, or select it from the menu. Yeah, and by default it will play the animation that it has. Now the way you program in GameMaker is through events. So GameMaker has a lot of events, like when the player presses a button, or when the instance gets created, or the objects in GameMaker are like classes in Java. So you create an object, you give it some properties, and then you can instantiate it as many times as you want. And you can also have inheritance, and and you can obviously like change properties of individual instances once you've created them. So first of all, we want to give the player a certain variable. So you can either do this in the create event, which is like, okay, when the instance, it's a constructor basically. When the instance gets created, run that code. Or because it's a variable, you can use the variable definitions menu down here. I think it's a bit nicer. So let's add a variable called velocity and give it a value of, I think it's 3. Right. This is a bit nicer because it shows up on the menus, unlike with the create event. This is an instance variable. So whenever you create an instance of object player, it will have this variable. By the way, don't call it speed because that's a reserved variable name that GameMaker has. Okay. Now we want to make the player object move around when you press the arrow keys. So we have these events. We have 3 categories of keyboard events. You have keyboard down, which is when you have your finger on the key. As long as you keep it pressed, it will run the code every single frame until you release it. Key pressed only runs it once, even if you keep your finger on it. And then key up is when you release it, only once as well. So in this situation, we want the code to keep running as long as we have our finger on the key. So we're going to use keyboard down for the left arrow key. This is the left arrow key on the keyboard. And it will open up the code here. Is it big enough? I think I'll make it a bit bigger. Right. So you can add like a description here if you want, like move left, but it's not really necessary. So to make the plane move left, all I have to do is just subtract to its x coordinate. Yeah. Oh, you can use the middle mouse key to pan around. Yeah, sorry, that's actually pretty useful to know. Yeah. If you don't have a mouse, I guess you can. If your touchpad supports triple, like mouse 3, you can also use the touchpad. And there's also a laptop mode, which I think helps you with this stuff when you don't have a mouse, but I'm not sure what it does. Oh, it says right there. While holding left control, yeah, okay, you can just read it. So if you don't have a mouse, you can use the laptop mode maybe. Okay. Anyway, once you add this event, you can add a new event for the same thing, but for the right key. And then the code will be pretty much the same, plus equals velocity. And then I'm just going to open the room. Now, very important thing, you need to have the... Okay, has everyone managed to do the code part?
Sim, seleciona depois tens que mudar a layer para isso e depois arrastei o objeto.
So maybe use one of the checkboxes.
Yeah, but I have used it before.
Okay, good. Yes, I see. Okay, so now that you have the code running, you can come into the room, our main room, and very important, you need to select the instances layer. Okay? And then just drag the player in there. So just drag the player to the middle, more or less, of the room. And now when we run it, now you should be able to move the plane around. Yeah. Okay, guys. One important thing. If you can see this layer menu, you can. There's a place where you can make it appear. So, damn it. Okay. If you open the room menu and you can't see the layer part, you can click room over here on the top and click layer view, and that'll show you the layers. Because it'll happen very often that you like you want to drag the player here and it gives you this error because you have the background layer selected. So you need to come here to the room, layer view to make it appear, and then select the instances layer. Okay. Now Okay, exercise. Now try to do the same thing as we did for the left and right keys for the vertical movement. Takes a little bit.
Key down, velocity, Y mais y velocity para velocity. Isto está ao contrário? Gostas de atuar, está ao contrário? Pois é. Nice. Fácil. Tinha pouco seguinte. Estava a
So most of you have probably found by now that GameMaker has the positive axis pointing downward, which is a bit strange. But yeah. Okay, now I've got the plane going up and down. Has everyone got the plane going up and down? Anyone? Okay, nice. Okay, so next, as you can see, the plane can go out of bounds right now, so we're gonna stop him. So this is as easy as you might imagine. You just add like an if function, an if statement. Oops. So if x is bigger than 0, you can move to the left. You don't need the parenthesis on the if, which is nice. The semicolon in GameMaker is mostly optional, but there's one case in which you need to use it, so it's best practice to just put the semicolon always. And when the player wants to go to the right, just if x is smaller than room width, do this. So the room width is just a variable that contains the width of the room that you're currently in. And so if you run this, okay, so it works on the left, but sadly, as you will see, it doesn't work on the right. The plane can still go out of bounds. What's happening here is that we have the plane's origin on the default value, which means that the player's xy coordinate is actually the top left corner of the plane. So when we go to the right, it's actually considering this corner, so the player goes like 0 pixels off screen. So what you want to do is to go into the sprite menu of the plane and set the sprite to the center of the image. So you go over here, open the player sprite, and you will notice you can a lot of stuff here. Okay, you'll notice in this menu you can just like click to change the origin to whatever you want, but it's easier if you just click this little menu here and select the middle center. And now it's at the origin is at the center of the plane. So now I'm going to go into the room and replace the player because it's going to have moved in the room slightly because we changed the origin. So I'm going to place it in the center. Doesn't really matter much, but and now when I run, you'll notice that the out of bounds code will work because we have the origin at the center. Hopefully, yeah. So it works. Okay, and now okay, see if you can add as well the vertical code for not going out of bounds.
What was the function again to get the width and height?
Room width. It's here.
Oh, okay.
It's room width. And the corresponding one is height.
Yeah. Makes sense.
One thing you may notice is that this is actually a naive way of implementing movement because, as you know from the Pythagoras theorem, the way we have this is that the player moves at a speed of 3 vertically and 3 horizontally. So if we're moving diagonally, the player might actually go faster. It won't go at the velocity of 3, but rather, square root of 2. So if you don't want this behavior, you'd have to do something like with the direction and so on. It'll be a little bit more complicated. We're not going to implement it, but keep this in mind when you're designing a game, because sometimes you might think the player is going at a particular speed, but you forget this property. Okay, so for this, instead of an if statement, you can also do something like y equals clamp, and then what is it? Yeah, y0 room height. You can also do something like this instead of an if statement. It like clamps the value between those, or you can use a max or a min if you prefer. Whoops, here it's y plus velocity, right? Yeah. Just paste it. Whoops. Okay, has everyone got the plane not going out of bounds now? It's working. Yeah. Did you use the checkpoint or not necessarily? Yes. Pode fazer há uma variável que é o spike como tu sabes que a origem está no centro, pode ser isso ou não.
Já para fazer mágica.
Ok, tipo somado. Também há umas cenas que se não tiver certeza que a origem vai estar no centro, pode usar mais umas funções que vão para cá no box. E atualmente essas cenas mesmo. Box step, Okay. Our friend there was asking how to make the plane not go off the screen like partially like this. Basically, there are some variables that you can use that give you the bounding box of the plane, the island. So I'm just going to call it object island and give it one of the island sprites, doesn't matter which. This object is going to be used for all the islands. So, and now I'm just going to, in the create event of this island, so whenever an instance of this gets created, I'm going to add vSpeed equals 1. What this will do is it'll make the island move at a vertical speed of 1, so it'll be always going downward. It's 1 because it's the same speed as our background. So if I go into the room and go to layer view and select background, oh, not background, I'm actually going to create a new layer, a new instance there, and I'm going to call it, going to put it under the normal one and call it islands, well, li islands. Actually, I'm going to rename all of these because I prefer having the prefix. So I'm going to rename the layers, create a new layer called ly islands, and now I'm going to like drag the island object here a couple of times. Ly is the prefix for layer, just. Where? Oh yeah. So when I created the island object, I used the create event, which is like the constructor, to add this line here, vSpeed equals 1. And this is a special GameMaker variable that controls the speed. So this will make the island go at a speed of 1 vertically downward. And what this does, as you will see, is it makes the island go at the same speed as the ocean to create as you can see, it creates this effect to pretend that the islands are moving with the ocean. Did everyone catch that? With the speed? Okay. Okay, next, we want the islands to wrap around. So I'm going to add the step event is one of the most important events. The step event is like the update in Unity. It runs every single step, so it's always running. So here I'm going to add something to make the islands wrap around the room. So if y is bigger than room height, we will make the island go back up. So y equals 0. And now when I run this, the islands will wrap around the room, so they'll constantly be coming back. So the island will reach and it goes back to the top, as you can see. Okay. But yeah, don't forget to create a new layer.
Below the
Yeah, below that. Otherwise, it's like
Não ter só um título.
Acho que isso vai fazer esse novo movimento. Acho que tem de mudar a ordem.
Okay, now we've got the islands. As you can observe, like the islands like teleported. You don't want that, obviously. So we're just gonna add some like a buffer zone, so that the islands don't teleport as soon as the origin hits the bottom of the screen. So they like disappear for a while and then they come back. Now the islands don't like look like they're teleporting. Now they, yeah, the transition is smoother now. Yeah. Also, we want to randomize their x coordinates. So x equals random range 0 room width. This will make it so that so when the islands reach the bottom, they'll have a randomized x coordinate. And also, we want to randomize their sprite. So we can use the choose function, which just randomly chooses one of these values. And now when the islands reach the bottom, they'll look like they're new islands. Yeah, as you can see. Okay. Was everyone able to do that?
They created them just to set the speed.
Oh yeah, it's after creation.
Yeah, that's a good point that you're raising there. When you're placing the islands, you can't place them like too close to one another, otherwise they'll how do I get the layer? Yeah, otherwise they'll you might get this, the islands might be overlapping, so spread them apart.
But after you restart, like when they go off screen and they come back, they might still get the same.
Yeah, but if you spread them on the y-axis, they won't. But yeah, if you want to make like a more complex system where, well, okay. Another thing, we also want to randomize the islands when they're created, right? So they're not like so static at the beginning. So we want to add this part, the choose island part, to the create event as well. But of course this is duplicated code, so we want to create a function for this, or scripts as they are called in GameMaker. So I'm going to create a new script, and I'm going to call it pick island sprite. You can add, yeah, this is actually important. You can add this thing to describe the function. Oops. Pick island sprite. This is useful because it will tell you the arguments of the script as you're writing your code. It'll appear in the autocomplete and so on. So it's at function, and then the name of the function, and then whatever you want to write. Usually the arguments. So Passing arguments into functions is actually pretty nasty in GameMaker, but we'll get there later. And now I want to paste the code to pick the island sprite. And now we just call this script in the create event and the step event when the islands are wrapping around. Oops. So. Is everyone keeping up? Any questions? Yeah. Okay. Yeah?
Depois de fazer ok, criei um script para pegar para valor. Não sei se é o objetivo do script.
É depois escolher a sprite dele.
Ok.
Porque nós queremos ter, quando tem conta aqui, nós queremos ter aquela cena dos jogos em vários sítios.
E aquelas sprite index?
É para. Isso é a parte de escolher as ilhas.
Sim, mas isso é o script em si, ou não?
Yeah, isto é o script em si. Has everyone been able to make this script? Fala maneira simples de fazer isso nesse sentido. Não, tens de fazer bifes, coisas assim. Acho que não tem assim nada. Okay, did you get all that? Okay, next up, we're going to call the script. So I'm going to replace this part with the script call. I'm going to put it in the create event, so it chooses the sprite randomly, and then in the step event as well when the island goes down. So, next. Later we'll see how to add arguments to this. So, okay, now I have another exercise for you. We want to create a bullet. There's a big bullet sprite. Yeah, I'm going to import it first, so you see which one it is. It's this one. Yeah. We want to use this bullet sprite for this exercise. So we want to create this bullet object, and when the player presses X, you want it to like move upward, and that's it. Was that clear, by the way? Okay, were you able to do this? Yeah. By the way, it's with brackets. This is this.
In fact, I don't think it exists. Yeah, it doesn't exist. It's a self, it's called self.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay, but don't want this is what you need to create, so it's the board.
Yeah. No, this is like.
Or on the oh no, never mind.
Where is that?
Oh, right, okay. You need to use a string here, actually.
That's just
This
in
thing, this thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, sorry, I actually forgot to explain this part. Okay, so when you go to create your bullet, you want to use the correct event, and then to create an instance of an object, you want to use instance create layer. There's also an instance create depth, but this is more of a legacy thing. The newer version prefers that you use the layer. And then these are the coordinates in which you want to create the object. And then when you pass the layer, it has to be a string for some reason. So this is the proper code to create the bullet. In the player object.
Okay. Anything else you need? Does it work?
Yeah.
Também teste esse vídeo lá, sabe?
No, I do it just without that. And the step I just.
Yeah. Sei que eu vejo com só em inglês.
I'm cheating.
Podes ficar aqui?
No, don't do it.
Onde eu li. Estamos a fazer outros sítios,
Como é que eu vou falar isto agora? Ok. Se uma vez na jacaré está sempre a ter questões que
This layer thing is actually a thing from the new version. I still use the older version of GameMaker. And apparently, from what I was reading in the documentation, if this layer doesn't exist, the game will crash. I don't know if there's a way to check beforehand to make sure the game doesn't crash, but well, we'll see. I suppose you can always create the layer manually first to check whether it exists.
será que se calhar algumas assim isto nessa
Tens duas opções, tens o depth e tens o layer. Se for o layer, passas assim se for depth, tens dar um número, que é o número, é a profundidade que temos, porque estas bolas têm uma profundidade. Deve ter mais valências, porque a cena das layers é mais. Mas pode usar elas funcionam. Porque as layers têm depth, mas acho que é mais simples pensar em layers do que pensar em. Depois que nós temos que ter objetos com todos com objetos diferentes, não precisamos dizer aí. Ok, vai ser expansão.
Se eu quiser destruir a bola, depois dizia ao som.
Há um evento que é para ver se a qualidade do seu objeto está fora da sala, mas isso pode dar problemas porque se o avião estiver um bocadinho fora do ecrã, então provavelmente quer dizer muito. Mas uma ideia, a função é isso. Provavelmente quer dizer instantâneas da coisa. E às vezes se o equipe estiver melhor, Okay, has everyone got the volt button?
Já não criei.
Oops. Oh, don't forget to center the bullet origin. Okay, has everyone got the thing working? Okay, so some of you already asked me to make the bullet get destroyed once it leaves the screen to avoid memory leaks, obviously. Here you'll want to use the step event and just check if y is smaller than like -100, for example, instance destroy. And this will by default destroy the instance that you're working on, so it will destroy the bullet. This is in the bullet step event, okay? This will make it be destroyed once it reaches the top. So, next, we want to add our first enemy to the game. Oh yeah. Okay, everyone done? Okay, so now we want to add our first enemy to the game. So I'm gonna add another sprite, the enemy sprite. Just take away this part of the name and center the origin, of course. And I'm going to create an object for this enemy. This enemy is just going to go straight down from the top of the screen down. So I'm just going to call it object enemy down. Give it the sprite. And now, similar to the bullet, we're going to give it a downward speed. So v speed equals, what was it? 2. Speed 2. And now, in the player object, after we've given this to the enemy, in the player object we want to add a collision event so that when the player collides with the enemy, the player will get destroyed. So I'm going to go to the player. Sorry, this is the sprite object player. Now add an event, and in the collision event with object enemy down, I'm going to add just instance destroy. Did everyone catch that? So it's instance destroy on the collision with the enemy. And the enemy has a downward speed of 2. And next we, okay, I'm going to just test this to show it off. I'm gonna add some enemies here. Yeah, see, the player gets destroyed once. Yeah, for sure.
Na bola, como é que a pessoa está a passar o consigo? Só ser. No meu estou crachado.
Tens qualquer coisa no step event? Não era o step event. Tens o velocity.
Sem entrar a ver.
Mas está tanto tudo.
Okay, was everyone able to grab the enemy?
Por default, se não és nada, ou
Sim.
mas pode dizer lá das taxas de neste caso seria self, mas
Faz sentido. Vais ter coisas.
Já tenho velocidade.
Okay, now we also want the yeah.
Como é que se faz a carta feijão?
Okay, you can also go ahead and do the same thing for the bullet. So in the enemy's code, or in the bullet's code, I guess. Yeah. Let's do it in the enemy code. When the enemy collides with the bullet, again, just instance destroy. And and before that, we also want to destroy the bullet, so instance destroy other. I'm gonna add .id because I'm a bit superstitious about this. But let's try just other, see if it works. So this is when the enemy collides with... yeah, it works as well.
The other is the enemy or the bullet?
In this case, we are working on the enemy, so the other is the bullet, yeah.
Okay.
The other is this one that you're colliding with.
Yeah. Was it? Prześcigniemy się, bo to będą sobie 4. Era mais fácil.
Oh my god. Maybe
Ale sugeruję, że ten powód
Something that must be more than one for some reason. Yeah, see, there's two holes there. One and one. So for some reason you have to create two holes.
Okay, sorry, we had a bigger question there. Okay, so next, we want to move the planes upward again, just like the islands, like we did with the island. So we're gonna take this code here and just move it to a script, like we did with the pick island sprite one. So here we're gonna do a call it move to top. We're gonna call it here, and we're going to create the script. Move to top. So this function will move the plane or the island to the top of the screen and randomize its X position. And we're going to place this, we're going to make the enemy do this when it goes off screen. So in the step event, if y is bigger than room height plus 100 or something, move it to the top.
So ele copiou o step da island e depois...
Yeah, a parte só do... posso mostrar outra vez o código? Yeah, so now the planes will reappear at the top again, just like the islands. This is the code that I copied to the function, to the script. And then we just call this script on the plane and on the island when they disappear at the bottom. So if their y position is bigger than, I can show it. If their room height is bigger than, if their y-axis is bigger than room height plus 100, move it to the top. So next. Okay, now create some nice explosions for the game because we don't want it to be boring. So I'm going to add these two assets. Explosion big. Now, I'm going to create an object for these explosions. Just like the islands, there will be only one object, even for the two explosions, because their behavior will be identical. So, object explosion, add one of the sprites, and then what we want to do is, oh, by the way, I'm going to set the speed, the animation speed on the explosions to 30, because they were created with that speed in mind, actually. And now, in the explosion object, we're going to add an event in the other tab called other, and the event will be animation end. So what this will do is when we create an explosion, it will play the animation, and then with this event it will destroy itself. We're going to add instance destroy to the animation end of the explosion. So now when the plane gets hit by the explosion, by the bullet, sorry, when the plane gets hit by the bullet, before destroying them, we'll create a new explosion object at the place where the plane was destroyed. So the layer is layer instances. It's object explosion. It's giving me an error. Yeah. Did everybody catch that? É na colisão do avião do inimigo com a bala. So now you'll see when we hit an enemy with a bullet, it'll play this little explosion animation. Yeah. So in the explosion object, what we did was add the event animation end, and then it just destroys the object when the animation ends. So it plays the animation and then it destroys itself. Okay. And when the player gets hit by an enemy, it also gets destroyed. So we also want to play the animation, the explosion, but we want to. Okay, now we want to create the explosion, but also change its sprite. So there's two ways to do this. We can use the var keyword. This means that this is a temporary variable. It only exists on this page of code with the var. And when you use this, the semicolon is mandatory. So don't forget the semicolon here. So var explosion is instance create layer, and we're going to create our explosion just like before. ly instances object explosion. Sorry, this goes off screen. Can you still see it? It's a bit... Sorry, the code looks a bit small. So, here what we're doing is we're creating an explosion, and then we're storing the ID of that explosion, that new instance, into this temporary variable. Okay? And then what we can do is we can do stuff with it, like explosion.spriteIndex equals sprite explosion big. So we're going to change the sprite using this instance ID. Was that clear? So what we're doing here is every instance in GameMaker has an ID, so we're storing it and then doing something with it. There's another alternative way of doing this, which is when you create the explosion, you can use a with statement. So you write with and then some instance, in this case an instance that we just created, and then you can do stuff with it. So sprite index equals sprite explosion big. So these are two alternative ways of doing it. Okay, don't do both because they do the same thing. So yeah, the with statement is used to change environment basically. So right now we're in object player, right? We're working on object player. So the self keyword relates to the player. But in here, inside the with statement, the self keyword relates to the explosion that we just created. The explosion that we created on this line here. Was that clear? You can also do stuff like with object enemy down. If we do this, now here inside this statement, self will relate to object enemy down, and this will actually run for each enemy that you have. So this code here would run for every enemy down that you have. Another thing is if you do other inside this with statement, this relates to the object that called the width. So it relates back to the player again. So if you have you can have nested with statements and so on. It's a bit confusing, but you can do it. So yeah. Was that clear, more or less? Did you understand the with statement? Well, anyway, you can pick one of these two ways of changing the explosion sprite. The one with the with or with the var keyword. Just pick one.
Tens aí alguma situação que está com os olhos centrados depois alguma coisa que não esquece
Mas chega ao fim da animação, deixa de existir os
por exemplo, neste caso eu escolhi mais pequena para os amigos e não mais para todos,
Só uma pergunta. Portanto, já adicionei como nascimento Assassin's Creed.
E mais nada.
Qual a seguinte?
A seguinte ok, tens a explosão. É criar a explosão quando o inimigo é destruído.
Ou seja,
quando os jogadores antes disso, crias a explosão com o Assassin's Creed. Não. Esqueces que é uma strip? E agora, se quiseres trocar quando o inimigo leva para lá, são duas maneiras de fazer a mesma cena. A ideia aqui é que tu queres usar uma das explosões para o jogador e outra para o então, não é, aqui podes deixar assim, mas agora quando vais fazer para o inimigo,
não, mas por exemplo, deste vai explosion igual a
é para guardar o inimigo por cima. Mas aqui, como tem já a grande para o jogador, faz isso Pois é, que é quando antes de destruir
e copiou as
dos dois. Aqui são duas maneiras e em vez do bico, neste caso, queres Okay, everything okay with the explosions?
Let's move on. We don't have much time left, sadly. Okay. So, the with statement is very useful, and the var statements as well, so don't forget about them. So, next, we want to create an object that will control our game. So, I'm going to add this computer thing. We're not actually going to see it in the game, but whatever. It's to help us, you know, when we're editing. So we're going to create an object control, which will be like the manager of our game. I'm going to give it a sprite, like this computer, and we don't want it to show up. So we're going to take the visible box here. There's this visible checkbox, and we're going to remove it because we want this object to be invisible. So now, oh, there's one thing I forgot actually. Oh well, we'll do it later. Oh no, never mind. I didn't forget anything. Okay, so I'm gonna now teach you about alarms. So when we want to control timing in our game, we use alarms. So first of all, we're gonna go into the create event of this new control object, and we're gonna write that it's 0 alarm. These alarms are a variable that each instance has like 12 alarms or something that you can use, and we're gonna set alarm 0 to 5 seconds. And so we have to type 5 times the room speed. Room speed is, by default, it's 60 steps per second. So because the alarm is in steps, and so we have to multiply it by the number of steps per second to get 5 seconds. So this means 5 seconds, basically. 5 times room speed. And now, this means that the alarm will be set to that number, and then every step it will be decremented. It'll subtract 1 from it. And then once it reaches 0, it will run the alarm 0 event. So now we can add some code to the alarm 0 event. So after 5 seconds, this will get triggered. So here we want to add, we want to create a new enemy, basically, every 5 seconds. So I'm going to create a new enemy here. Instance create, layer. I'm going to write X for now, I guess. No, yeah, let's randomize it from the beginning. So var xx, this is just xx is just some name, it doesn't have any special meaning. Random range 0. Actually, no, sorry, let's do this another way. Let's use the width statement, or var. I'm going to use width. Width this new enemy that we're creating, we're going to create it at 0, 0, because you'll see in a second, because we're going to create it at 0, 0 and then just instantly move it to a random X position and to the top of the screen. So type the layer and call it, and create object enemy down. So do this. And now instantly just move it to the top. And then we want this to loop. So we're going to do the same thing again. Alarm 0, 5 times room speed. So this means every 5 seconds a new plane will be created. I'm actually going to make it so that... yeah, I'm going to do it once every 1 second. It'll be quicker. And in the create event, I'm going to switch it to just 1, so it triggers like after a single step. So yeah, basically you set the alarm, and then the alarm will set itself again. So it loops back. Okay, has everyone copied this code? Can I move on? Move on? Any questions?
Is that alarm 1 time?
This means 1 second basically.
Why do we need to do that?
Sorry?
Why do we need to do that?
Because basically, okay, the game runs at 60 steps per second. So in 1 second, the game will do like 60 ticks.
But why do we need to say the alarm?
Because the alarm is in steps. And so we want this to be 60 steps so that it takes 1 second. Right? Basically it's 1 times 60 so that it's 1 second. We'll see, you'll see. Okay, now don't forget to add the control object to the room. Just add it in. And now when you run the game, there will be new enemies being created all the time.
The object control, when you create an enemy, oh yeah, it's got with yeah, exactly. That will move the enemies. As you can see, it works.
Okay, one extra thing that's really useful in the object control, we're going to add an event for when you press the R key. Key pressed R, just to restart the game. So the code for this is just game restart. Oh, whoops, game restart. This will restart the game for us. So when the player dies or something, you want to test the game again, just press R, and it'll work. Okay, so now, yeah, it works. See, I have another exercise. This one's going to be tricky. Basically, I want you to do it so that when the player holds the X key, every 0.5 seconds a bullet will be fired, even if the player is like with their finger on the key all the time. Every 0.5 seconds. So use alarms to do this. Basically, the idea is you want some variable to say called can shoot that you have to set to true after 0.5 seconds. 0.5 seconds after the player shoots. So we have to use a Boolean variable and an alarm to create this behavior. Yeah.
Se tens os outros, nós aqui temos só um outro. Estamos a usar o mesmo objeto, só trocamos o separador. Mas nesse caso, é, eu só queria tem que ser um completo small. A variável tem que ser tens que declarar ou no create event ou no variable definition. É game underscore reset. Do object control. Porque senão depois de morrer já não consegues fazer direto. Porque o objeto já não
Tens mais só
Yeah. So to initialize the can shoot variable, you want to do it either in the variable definitions maybe, or in the create event. Just can shoot equals true, for example. Any questions? Não, está no relatório. Não é sempre que falar. Não sei qual é a
When I say you can shoot, I'm not using
Até porque imagina que se depois tiveres vários planos, vocês conseguem ter um lado separado.
At first, I've made a variable called fire. Não sei, não
Okay, has anyone been able to do it yet? Did you do it?
Okay, we have to move on, so I'm just gonna give you the solution, if you don't mind. Hope you. Whoa. Okay, so yeah, this is a bit tricky, but it's actually quite simple. So, first of all, we initialize the canShoot variable, of course. By the way, there are no booleans actually in GameMaker, like you do have. It's like in C, they're a real under the hood. So the only variable types in GameMaker are reals and strings, more or less. There might be some special ones, but yeah. So you initialize canShoot, and then you want to change this event. Yeah, you can actually change events by right-clicking, and you can duplicate them, or you can change them. So we're gonna change it to key down X. And now, okay. So as long as the player is pressing the button, you check if. Sorry? Oh. Yeah. As I was saying, you can right-click an event, and then click Change Event to change it. Right-click, change. You can also duplicate them if you want. Okay. Now, if the player can shoot, then you create the bullet, and you set the alarm to 0.5 seconds. And then once the alarm, also can shoot must be set to false now. And then when the alarm triggers, then you want to set can shoot back to true. Okay, so now in the alarm event, alarm 0. Also, make sure to use the right alarm number, so don't set alarm 1 in one place and then use the alarm 2 event, for example. It's an easy way to make your code not work, and it's tricky to check. Oh, also another important thing I didn't tell you, if you press F1, it opens up I believe it's F1. Yeah, it opens up the manual, and it's really useful because it has pretty detailed descriptions of every single function and variable in GameMaker, and you can use it to learn about new features and so on. So, yeah. Hopefully this works. Yeah, it works. Okay, I think I'm going to set this to 0.25 instead. Yeah. Did everyone manage to get the behavior right? Okay, so next. Gonna refresh my workspace. And now, okay, let's add HP to the player. So again, just we're gonna create a new variable called max HP, and I'm just gonna set it to 100, for example, and then HP, which will be equal to max HP by default. So now instead of dying instantly when the player hits a plane, it will lose HP first, and then it will die. Okay. So max HP equal to 100, and then HP equal to max HP. And now, when the player hits an enemy, we're going to add some behavior for losing HP and dying. So, if the player's HP is smaller or equal to 0, then we'll destroy it, as we did before. Otherwise, decrement the health by 1. Minus equals 1, yeah. GameMaker also accepts minus minus or n++, but okay. And now this is going to work. You can test it, but we also want to draw a health bar. Okay. So let's test it first. Make sure you got it right. Okay, so now the player doesn't die instantly, but if you stand on a plane for too long, then it gets destroyed. Did you all get the XP down correctly? Yeah. So, do you have this part? Okay. Basically, we just want to set a variable called max HP to 100, and then a variable called HP to max HP. So this will be, to initialize. And then with this code, you can check whether the player is ready to die or whether you should keep decrementing their health.
Sim, não. Ou seja, ele fica com 0 de HP e só da próxima vez que for.
Yeah, it's true. It has a 1-step delay between. Doesn't matter, but you could fix it. Okay, now the more interesting part. Okay, now we want to draw a health bar. So, to draw a health bar in GameMaker, you want to draw a rectangle, and you want to give it the top left corner and the bottom left corner. So this will be our rectangle for the health bar. So, we're also going to do a linear interpolation, because we need to draw the health bar like up to the point where the player has health. Right? So sometimes we'll draw it partially. So I'm going to show you the code for this. You want to go to the draw event. In this case, draw GUI. There's multiple draw events, as you can see. We want the second one, draw GUI, which just means that it's on top of everything else, I guess, and it's probably independent of the camera as well, if we had one that we would be messing around with. So the code we want to use is first of all, what we want to do is we need to define the width, the maximum width of our health bar. So max width equals 120, for example, and then we want to define the top left point. The top left point of the rectangle. So the top left will be 0 room height. So we're going to draw it at the bottom left corner of the screen, right? 0 room height, and then the other point of the rectangle that we'll define will be y2 is simple. We just get y1 and subtract a little bit to it. And the x2 point is a little bit trickier. We want to use linear interpolation, which will be between 0 and the maximum width. And now, so linear interpolation, do you know what linear interpolation is? Okay, I'll explain it for those who don't know. Basically, it's like when you have 2 points. How do I explain this? When you have 2 points and you want to scale this thing, so let's say we have a scale from 1 to 2, for example, and we want to make this a scale from minus 100 to 60. So it will be a lot bigger, right? To 60. If you want to match any point on this line to this line, you use linear interpolation. That's it. Oh, okay. So here, we're the first two arguments are this one, this point, and this point, 0 and
120. And the third argument will be a number between 0 and 1, which is where we are on this line. So if this line were from 0 to 1, where we would be. So it's a percentage, essentially. So to get this percentage, it will be HP divided by max HP. This will give us, a number over the max number. It gives us the percentage. That's it. So now it's time to actually draw our rectangle. I'm going to set the color first. We need to set the color before drawing. And then just draw the rectangle. The arguments are pretty simple. Just x1, y1, x2, y2. And this, the last argument, is whether or not it's just an outline. Whether you want to not fill it. We want it to be filled, so we're going to set it to false. And you can actually, on the bottom of the window here, you always see the autocomplete, the hint telling you what the arguments are. Any questions, by the way? É para ele ficar cheio e não ser só tipo a parte de fora do retângulo.
Mas é só a borda.
Se for true, é só a borda. Você pode encontrar todos os dados.
Nós, quando estamos a colidir, estamos sempre a mandar um código de fazer a desvio.
Exatamente.
Aquilo vai, só todos os nos matar.
Todos os testes ou continuar a comentar?
E não destruímos o outro?
Não, podem destruir se quiser. So the collision event, the way it works is every single step that you're colliding, it will be decrementing the health. It will run that code every single step as long as you're colliding.
Se nós por acaso metermos o inimigo que está a destruir-se com mais uns bocadinhos, nós só nos fazer uma vida.
Exatamente. Okay, has everyone copied the code? Okay, so let's test it. Okay, so you see we have the health bar there, and when I'm colliding with an enemy, it goes down, and eventually I'm gonna die when it reaches 0. Yeah. Okay, so now we have a new exercise. I just want you to add a black background to the health bar, so when it's not full, you can see the black rectangle behind it, and make it change color depending on the HP that you have. It's quite simple. Yeah.
Só para fazer agora que perguntar. Por exemplo, eu pus a vida 3, faço uma incrementar cada vez que eu bato. Calma,
tu só estás a matá-lo quando puderes destruir.
Isto aqui, esse daqui.
Ou nos dois. Se queres fazer mais fixe, mas podes fazer. Há uma função específica para isso, que é merge colors. Merge color, metes uma, a outra e depois uma é mesmo o workshop.
Se eu consigo uma coisa engraçada, eu pus para 3, ou seja, 1, 2.
Como tem 0.
Mas eu pus para. Não é igual. Só vi este. Se calhar pelo facto de ser que ela neste momento.
Pode ser algum tipo de zona. Sim. Mas isso tem que ouvir a 0.
É que elas até um bocadinho na bola, não só. 1, 2,
Fica mais apanhado se tiver como
Vamos fazer draw text. No evento draw text, é para ver tipo quanto é que falta no draw. Foi draw text. 50-50. Depois
começa a ficar mais avançado. Ficar mais. Ok. É isso, ok. Estava a perceber.
Ele diz muito para fazer.
quando essa coisa podes perguntar como pôr como
Já pus.
eu sei que não existem muitas vezes.
Então, mas é que porque assim vai bem. Estou com bot. Se vir for menor ou maior,
Vou pensar nisso.
se eu fizer só assim, tendo em conta que ele vai ser. Essa interpretação não vai. Deixa tu ver. Depois que eu não acho, lá. Atividade 3, eu acho que choca, se ele for 0 para na hora que for 0, pode é.
Mas eu não vou ver a taxa de
esta semana da vida, neste momento tenho 3 minutos, 2, aqui e agora,
Os teus estão a morrer quando.
E tu não morres, não é? Sabes porquê? Porque o que tu estás a fazer, estás a te incrementar depois de quando vês se ele tem
então é o tal step para trás.
Por exemplo, eu aqui tenho sempre, cada meto, não tenho else, meto o HP por cima daquele simplesmente não tem. Qual é? É no HP menos igual a 1, está em cima só. Portanto, cada vez que cliques, tiras o HP. E depois a seguir, tiras o HP, vais ver, comparas. Em vez de fazer ao contrário, se fizeres ao contrário, comparas, tens um vídeo e só depois tens vês se tens um
I was thinking of doing this with if statements, but if you wanted to do like alert for colors, there's a like if you want to alert between green and red, you can use merge color.
E podes, se quiseres destruir o outro, tens é que antes do outro HP destrói. Pegar menos um ou
This is like alert for colors if you want to.
Estavas a matar os
Interpolation for colors, if you want to do like interpolation between red and green.
É capaz de dar um erro.
Yeah, if you want to look at the colors, just do this. Yeah, so it's just like what with colors.
And this is useful because colors are RGB or HSV. They're not just one numbers. Well, they are, but this makes it simpler. Actually, maybe it works with just blur, possibly. Yeah, ok. Tchau, obrigado. Não dá, estava a experimentar se funcionava, mas não. É preciso usar uma escola.
Pode ser. Pode funcionar, dependendo do objetivo.
E eu faço outras coisas ao contrário. Ah, ao contrário? Ok, não vai fazer uma Ok, obrigado.
Primeiro vai ter que falar que os valores são
Okay, so thank you all for coming. That's the end of this session. So next week we'll have the same thing with more advanced stuff. We'll keep doing the thing. Yeah, thanks for coming. Bring friends next time. More? Sure. Hope you liked it. Hope it was useful. If you have any more questions and stuff, you can shoot me an email, or I'll still be here for a few more minutes if you want. So.
Não sei se